The Shmospel of Sebastian. Part 2. Sunday, February the 19th, 2006. We started walking, and Shmeiki Baba said, "When I remember to process the world through the sensations of my body and not just through my thoughts, I feel a shift in my brainwaves. I want to spread my attention until I have regained full body awareness in every moment." "Om Shmeiki," I said. From the hamlet of Devla, we walked on to the river Kajali. The water was clean and we jumped straight in. After a relaxing swim, we continued along footpaths for some 20 kilometers until we arrived at the beautiful village of Parsharamwadi on the river Bav. There we met Gita, a graceful old lady with long white hair, who was struggling to carry her shopping basket. Shmeiki Baba offered to help her, and she was overjoyed, explaining that her family was away, so she was by herself. When we reached her house, she insisted we come in for tea. Her garden was carefully tended and contained many sorts of unusual flowers and plants, as well as a glorious white peacock who presented his feathers as we entered. On the wall of the house was a painting of the goddess Kali, standing on the body of Lord Shiva. Kali wore a chain of men's heads around her neck. She was holding a sword, the head of a demon, and a plate to catch the blood, which was dripping from the demon's head. This was possible because of her 4 arms. Shmeiki Baba stood staring at the picture as though in a trance. "The demon is my shame," he said. Gita brought us a pot of chai and a tray of Palji biscuits, which we finished off quickly. When she saw how hungry we were, she went back into her kitchen and returned with 2 bowls of curry and rice. The food was wonderfully tasty, and we were both touched by her kindness. I was surprised when Shmeiki Baba told Gita that he felt inclined to kiss her feet, and she invited him to do what he felt was right. He knelt down and began to kiss her right foot, and it looked so natural that I found myself kissing her left foot. Within the energetic triangle that was created between us, I experienced some kind of portal opening. I was transported to a realm where I was greeted by beings who infused me with love and guided me to the spirit of Gita's deceased husband, and I told him that she was well and he did not need to worry about her. When I opened my eyes, Gita was weeping, and I allowed her tears to fall into my mouth. She placed her hands on both of our heads to bless us, and as we stood up, Shmeiki Baba realized that he had urinated in his pants. Gita was most amused by this, offered him a towel, and took his trousers to wash. She said she wanted to wash the rest of our clothes as well, and also gave me a towel to wear while she did so. Our clothes dried quickly in the sun while we relaxed. Gita lit a kerosene stove and put an iron on it to heat up. We said she didn't need to press our clothes, but she insisted. "A real iron," said Shmeiki Baba. "I don't think I've seen one of those being used before." Neither had I. "What a country of paradoxes this is," said Shmeiki Baba. "They have been putting satellites into space since the 1980s, yet some people still heat their irons with fire." Gita even sprayed rose water onto our clothes as she ironed them, and this made them smell wonderful. We put them on with delight, and finally parted ways with her in deep appreciation and with an expanded sense of love. On we walked, with an extra bounce in our step, 5 kilometers to the small town of Devruk, and from there we continued 7 kilometers further to the village of Kosum. Tuesday, February the 21st, 2006. Every wonder we experienced confirmed to me that while our universe may be artificial, and while our lives on the crust of our world may be unstable, it is our duty to trust existence. Meanwhile, the goodness of the people we met caused our confidence to grow. We experienced that the more kind we are, the more kind people are to us. Sometimes we were nervous about not having anything to eat or drink, but when we remembered to give expression to our fears and to surrender to our situation, food and water would appear from one direction or another. In the morning, we were resting against a tree close to the village of Kasabi. A man walked past us holding some dead hens by their necks. He stopped next to us, surprised by our presence, and when he saw our instruments, he asked us to play for him. We did so, and he enjoyed our song so much that he gave us one of the hens. We were so grateful to him that we hugged him. I plucked the hen and gutted her, while Shmeiki Baba prepared a fire. To eat meat after so long felt strange, and she was rather chewy, but she sustained us. We needed this strength because we had already begun a climb of more than 20 kilometers along footpaths which ran over the Western Ghat Mountains in the direction of the town of Helwak. As we walked, Shmeiki Baba talked about the concept of education fatigue. He said that sometimes he was frightened of receiving new information, and he reckoned this was because at school he had been oversaturated with irrelevant bullshit. And then he shouted out in pain, and it turned out that he had managed to cut the ball of his foot on some glass which was buried in the mud. He sat down against a tree at the side of the road and propped up his leg because blood was flowing from the wound. He got out his bottle of Dettol disinfectant, and we washed the cut and made a bandage from one of his shirts. After resting a little while, he tried to walk on his wounded foot, but it was too painful. "The wound on my soul mirrors the wound in my soul," he said, "but it's okay because I had a tetanus booster before I left England." As we sat wondering what to do, 4 farmers passed us and stopped to see if we needed any help. They didn't speak any English, so I explained, as best as I could in my broken Hindi, what had happened, and they pointed to their village and said "chikitsak," which means doctor. I explained that we didn't have any money for a doctor. They said that it didn't matter, and they offered to carry Shmeiki Baba to their village, where they said the doctor would be happy to help him. I explained this to Shmeiki Baba, who looked a little worried but agreed. And so the farmers hoisted Shmeiki Baba upon their shoulders, and off we went until finally we reached the house of the doctor. "This is where the doctor lives?" I asked, surprised by the very simple corrugated iron and mud house. "Yes," they said, and one of the farmers knocked on the door. An old man answered, dressed in white robes. His eyes were bright green, and he exuded an unusual calmness. "Hello, my name is Sudha," he said. We introduced ourselves, and Shmeiki Baba showed him his foot. "Will you answer me one question?" asked Sudha. We said yes. "If time is an illusion, what are my wrinkles?" he asked. "Everything is an illusion, even your wrinkles," I said, "and yet Shmeiki Baba's foot still needs healing." "Very true," said Sudha. We explained that we didn't have any money, but we could play music. Sudha said that money mattered less than music, and asked Shmeiki Baba to lie down on the bed in his kitchen, and he took off our improvised bandage. He inspected the wound, whispered a prayer in Sanskrit, went into another room, and came back with a trumpet and a tube of turmeric paste. He blew the trumpet 9 times and put the paste around the cut. He explained that while the turmeric would help the wound heal, the important thing was the prayer and the trumpet. He proceeded to apply a fresh bandage to Shmeiki Baba's foot and asked us to stay as his guests, and we were glad to. He fed us, and we played music to him all evening, sitting in the garden of his house under an enormous Bodhi tree. Sudha also arranged our beds. It was our first night sleeping inside since we had left Arambol. By morning, Shmeiki Baba could already walk on his foot, but on doctor's orders, we chose to take a day of rest to give the wound more time to heal. Thursday, February the 23rd, 2006. Shmeiki Baba's wound had closed, and it seemed the cut was not quite as deep as first thought. Sudha suggested that Shmeiki Baba could walk, but should take it easy for a few more days. He gave Shmeiki Baba a tube of turmeric paste and some more bandages. We thanked him sincerely, said goodbye, and slowly walked 5 kilometers until we reached Shivsagar Lake. This is a reservoir which was formed in the 1960s after the Koyna River, which rises in Mahabaleshwar, was impounded by the building of the Koyna Dam, an enormous roaring industrial temple of hydroelectric power, more than 100 meters high. We were shocked by its size, and it stood before us as a symbol of the world that we thought we had left behind. We were reminded by some children that it was the eve of the festival of Shivaratri, and we decided to look for a good spot to celebrate. As Shmeiki Baba's foot was holding up, we wandered along the lakeside for another 2 kilometers until we found a chai and samosa stand just next to the water. I suggested this might be a good place to set up camp, as we would likely be offered food and drink in exchange for playing music. And so we stopped there and befriended Yogesh, the owner of the food stand. This was not just any food stand, it was Yogesh #1 chai and samosas. He insisted we try both, and we were glad to. Sunday, February the 26th, 2006. In the morning, we awoke to find some students and a couple of families wanting to camp on our little beach. A tall, holy man dressed in orange robes also arrived. He said his name was Santosh, and he asked to sit with us, and we welcomed him. And then Ram, a friend of his, also joined us, followed by Gayanendra and Shankara, and 2 more who had taken an oath of silence. And so we found ourselves in the company of 6 real Babas. Of their group, Santosh spoke the best English. "You are white fakirs," said Santosh on hearing our story. "That's not very nice," said Shmeiki Baba. "I said fakir, not fakir," said Santosh. "A fakir is a holy man, like you, who lives only from the goodness of others." "I am less a holy man and more a self-entitled hipster," said Shmeiki Baba. Santosh explained to the others in Hindi what he thought Shmeiki Baba had told him. "You know," said Santosh, "tonight is Mahashivaratri, the great night of Shiva. This is why tonight you shouldn't lie down at all. You should sit in meditation with your spine vertical. This time, just before the equinox, is when there is a very big upward movement of energy." Hearing this, we both sat up straight. "Yes, when the moon is dark, mind is quiet, and it is easy to be at one with the soul," said Santosh. "Tonight, everyone has potential to be awakened. So even if you don't meditate throughout the year, do it at least tonight. Just do it. Just do it." "You're quite insistent about it," said Shmeiki Baba. "I want for you only the best," said Santosh. Peanuts and chillums were passed around, and songs to Shiva were sung. Ram took ash from the fire and made a Tripundra Tilaka pattern on Shmeiki Baba's forehead, which consisted of 3 horizontal lines of ash with a circle made of red kumkum powder in the middle. Then he did the same for me. Once blessed, we played more music, soaring high on the wings of A, D, and E minor, tuned, of course, to 432 Hz, and we lifted our fellow Babas with us. Towards sunset, Yogesh unexpectedly approached us with a tray of drinks. "Bhang lassi," he said, "for utsav, for celebration, and it is made with milk of black cow." There was great excitement among the sadhus. The yogurt was sweet, thick, and fresh, and had a strong taste of ganja. As we drank, a white dove flew over our heads. Gayanendra, the oldest Baba, lifted his empty glass to the sky, and with lassi still dripping from his moustache, he shouted, "Masakale! Masakale!" and the others echoed his call. Santosh, by way of explanation, said, "Fly high like dove with peace and liberation, my friends." We echoed this sentiment. Santosh and the other Babas sat chanting Shiva mantras, sometimes clapping, their heads moving in figure-of-8 patterns. We sat meditating, and after about an hour, the effects of the cannabis kicked in. I disappeared into a dream that I was in a boat on the river Ganges in Varanasi. Rowers were battling the force of the river, keeping me from getting swept downstream. Dead babies were floating by me, swollen up and covered in flies. Then I found myself back on land, and a tour guide, who had the face of my grandfather, insisted I go with him into a house where old people were waiting to die. There, I looked into an elderly man's face and realized he was an older version of myself. A bright light appeared and eclipsed us both, and I fell into a white space which I understood was the world of potential which sits behind the skin of reality. It was in the middle of the night when I finally woke to this world. Shmeiki Baba was lying next to me. I realized he was covered in vomit, but was still too far gone to care. I turned my attention to Ram, who was staggering around by the side of the lake next to the tents of other people who were camping there. "Wake up, everyone!" he shouted when he realized they were sleeping. I called to him, "Stop it, man, you're tripping. Let them sleep." "Don't tell me what to do," yelled Ram. "What are you doing?" shouted a man from inside his tent. "It is Shivaratri. What are you sleeping for?" asked Ram. "We have children here. Go away," shouted back the man. Ram refused, and the man got out of his tent, offered Ram some money to quit it, and finally he did so. Meanwhile, Santosh, who was sitting next to me, explained, "I am from Karnataka. When I was a boy, we would throw stones at houses on Shivaratri. On this night, it was allowed, because if you wake someone on Shivaratri, you are automatically doing them a favor." Shmeiki Baba returned to this world singing some sort of children's song. A finger of fudge is just enough to give your kids a treat. It's full of chocolatey goodness, but helps to rot your teeth. I helped him to the lake to wash, and he explained to me what he had seen. I saw an old train and a tunnel in front of it, which was blocked off. I found myself pulling off wooden boards to open up the tunnel, and when this was done, I got on the train. I was the only person on board, and it began to move. In the darkness of the window, I saw my mother. She picked up a child version of me and threw me into the dining room of our house and slammed the door, leaving me alone. And Sheila spoke to me and told me that what mattered more than my memories was to allow myself to feel the pain that is locked inside me. With this, my lower back began to hurt. I knew I needed to go into this pain, but another part of me didn't want to. My mind threw out lurid images of cavalry soldiers swinging swords riding towards me. I did not run away, but allowed them to dismember me. I stayed with the pain. It became my anchor, and I felt a deep emotional splinter was coming out of my soul. Finally, the train stopped. Sheila told me that I had done well, but there was still further to go. In the distance, 3 glowing entities were waving. I was fascinated by them and understood that they didn't want to get too close for my sake. I realized that these were the Shagasomin, the beings who generated our universe. I acknowledged that they are my facilitators, and I felt myself accelerating until I was catapulted forward into a red and white world where an enormous serpent began to wrap himself around me. I kept my body moving and was succeeding in staying alive when Yogesh's dog came and licked my face. I opened my eyes to see what was going on, and the serpent in my vision ate me. "I'm glad the serpent ate you," I said. "Why is that?" he asked, surprised. "The serpent is a symbol of life force," I said. "Your fight against it is the fight of your ego against the great tide of life." "Yes," said Shmeiki Baba, and he held his hands up to the heavens and began to sing. Like stars, we are born from collapsing clouds of dust and gas. We learn names, we accept laws, and forget ourselves. Finally, we remember boundless love. Monday, February the 27th, 2006. We awoke late and sat enjoying the green hills surrounding the lake. The rest of the Babas were still sleeping, strewn in a variety of positions, apart from Santosh, who had already made a fire and was heating water. The state of our camp revealed the intensity of the celebration the night before. "You know, this dam has withstood earthquakes, especially the big one of 1967, which caused many cracks," said Santosh. "But it's okay, they fixed it." "That's reassuring," I said. Santosh cooked tapioca with nuts for breakfast and said that afterwards he and his friends would go to the dam to beg for money. "We live on alms, supported by people and temples. You are like us. You should come with," said Santosh. Once the others had awoken, swum in the lake, and eaten breakfast, we went with them to beg. Maybe it is perverse, but we enjoyed the novelty of asking Indian tourists for bakshish, and we were blessed by Mahalakshmi, goddess of wealth, as in about an hour we had made 150 rupees together. I was being very light-hearted when I noticed Shmeiki Baba looking uncomfortable. "What's wrong?" I asked him. "You're leading me astray," he said. "Have you gone mad?" I asked, astonished by his accusation, and I was about to tell him more about what I thought when I saw that now familiar look on his face. Sheila 6. And Sheila spoke as follows. "If you are honest, you did not really have a problem with begging. Your issue is more that you were worried how it looks from the outside because of the notion that it is wrong for a wealthy Westerner to be taking money from Indian people. Deep down, you still feel that you are a bad person who causes damage to others. This belief stands against your very existence, which is why it is hard for you to acknowledge. That is why it was easier to blame Sebastian rather than taking responsibility for your actions. Of course, it is very human to project the parts of yourself you are denying onto others. You need to understand that there's no getting rid of old patterns of behavior. The only thing you can do is to show yourself that there are new possible ways to respond and new patterns of behavior to develop. In due course, I will give you an exercise to help you care less about how you seem to others. For now, I simply want you to acknowledge what your shame is built upon." And that was it. Sheila was quiet, and Shmeiki Baba asked me, "Can I tell you something from my childhood?" "Of course," I said. "I remember being about 5 years old. I'm lying in bed, and I can hear my father struggling to breathe in the next room. He says to my mother that he is having a heart attack and asks her to call an ambulance. She does so, and I hear her explaining down the phone where we live. I want to get out of bed to help, but I cannot because I'm scared stiff, and I stay in bed and fall back asleep, only to wake again to the sound of the doorbell. My mum answers the door and ambulancemen come upstairs. There is a lot of loud talking and clattering. I guess they are bringing up some kind of stretcher. My father is breathing loudly. They leave with more clattering, and there is silence again, and I fall back asleep. When I wake up, I get out of bed and go to my mother. I see the look of fear in her face and understand we are in danger. She says that everything is okay, but I know it is not. I feel guilty because I didn't get out of bed to help, and also because I feel that my father's heart attack is my fault. I said to Shmeiki Baba, "You are safe now. You can afford to be vulnerable, to risk being intimate with the world, and even to be seen as a beggar." "Yes, brother," he said. Wednesday, March the 1st, 2006. We rose to morning mist hanging over the lake. I asked Shmeiki Baba how his foot was. He took off the bandage and found that the wound was almost completely healed. We decided it was time to leave, and once we had drunk chai, we exchanged our 150 rupees for samosas, filled our water bottles, played a final song, and said our farewells. We began our walk up the hilly eastern banks of Lake Shivsagar, northwards in the direction of the village of Medha. As we walked, I mentioned how I'd enjoyed the company of the sadhus. I wonder what made each of them renounce their worldly lives, I asked. Maybe they were walking out on their families or their debts, said Shmeiki Baba. Thoughtfully, we continued approximately 30 kilometers along the side of the lake and made camp. Thursday, March the 2nd, 2006. We reached the village of Medha in the evening after another long walk. Here we crossed from the Western Ghats onto the Deccan Plateau. In Medha, we were lucky enough to meet Lalu, a friendly and inquisitive rickshaw driver, who insisted we come with him to his house, and when we agreed, he told us that it was destiny we had arrived in his village, just as George W. Bush had arrived in Delhi to sign a nuclear deal with Manmohan Singh. Lalu's little house was old and rather decrepit, and he lived by himself because his wife had died. The walls were marked with years of water stains, which looked like maps of some mysterious land. Lalu presented us with bowls of his special dal, which was super spicy, and he served it with flatbread he called bakri, explaining this was like a roti but coarser. After dinner, he excitedly told us that Rambo 2 was on TV and turned on his 1980s television set, and we watched the movie with him, with the contrast turned up far too high. He had only one bedroom, which he offered to us, but we insisted we sleep in his living room on the floor. Friday, March the 3rd, 2006. After breakfast, we left Lalu and walked to the town of Shirwell and crossed the river Neera at Sarola. It was a steady climb until Ashkawadi, and from there it was to be a long and gradual descent to the city of Pune. This was the furthest we had walked in one day, and the proximity of our destination kept us going. Unlike the rest of the places we had passed through, Pune was the first place we both already knew, and we were excited to arrive. It was late into the evening when we reached the southwest edge of Pune, and the plentitude of city lights brought us back to the story of modern civilization. Shmeiki Baba said, "The first time I arrived in Pune, I did so by train. In fact, it was my first train ride in India. I remember the joy of sitting in the open doorway of the second-class carriage as we clattered through the countryside of Maharashtra, bathing in the pink light of the setting sun. I could barely contain the sense of expansion in me, and tears streamed down my cheeks. The ticket collector came by and put a supportive hand on my shoulder. We spent some time looking for somewhere appropriate to camp and couldn't find a park, so we decided to sleep under a tree by the side of the road. It smells like shit, I said. It's running underneath us through the drains, said Shmeiki Baba. Inhale it as though it is perfume, and it will desensitize your nose. I tried what he suggested and gagged. We could see enormous rats scurrying about. I hope they don't eat us while we're sleeping, said Shmeiki Baba. And then we noticed that painted on the wall on the opposite side of the road were the words, "State is a fear of mind," and we laughed. Saturday, March the 4th, 2006. At dawn, we were woken by the sound of vehicles and horns tooting. We jumped up, happy to be alive, and got walking in the direction of Corrigan Park, which is in the east of the city. As the light grew stronger, So the number of motorbikes and scooters increased. Soon, the volume of morning traffic was astounding, and the pollution made us choke. I am trying to remember that the divine is in all things, and all things are in the divine, said Shmeiki Baba. At one intersection, we saw a guy on a motorbike who had replaced his broken wing mirror with a large pink plastic bathroom mirror. Clever move, said Shmeiki Baba to the man, who was pleased with the recognition. While I was laughing, I tripped over a raised paving stone, and as I got up and brushed myself down, a bookseller took the opportunity to try to sell me a copy of Mein Kampf. Interesting choice, said Shmeiki Baba. I asked the man why he was selling shit like this. He shrugged in a way which made me angry, so I grabbed the book and threw it in the road. The bookseller yelled at me, at which point a man wearing a McDonald's uniform stepped in to calm the situation. He encouraged us to keep walking with him. Shmeiki Baba said, "Thank you, Rajesh Kumar," and I thought he was becoming clairvoyant until I realized that Rajesh's name was written on his name badge. "You have 5 stars, said Shmeiki Baba. "Yes, sir, I have 5 stars, sir," said Rajesh. "What are they for?" asked Shmeiki Baba. "Well, sir, they show I am competent in the areas of restaurant dining, cashier, grill station, fry station, dressings, and backroom hygiene." "Goodness," said Shmeiki Baba. "And what are you doing here?" asked Rajesh. "We're making a pilgrimage," said Shmeiki Baba. "To Pune?" asked Rajesh. "Sebastian is, but I'm continuing to Dharamsala," said Shmeiki Baba. "To Dharamshala, no less. Well, do say hello to His Holiness from me," said Rajesh as we reached McDonald's. "I shall do my best," said Shmeiki Baba, and Rajesh pointed us in the direction of Corrigan Park. As we walked on, we saw 2 children being taken to school by their mother. "Check the school bag," said Shmeiki Baba, pointing towards the blue satchel worn on the back of one of the kids. Printed on the left side of the bag was an image of George W. Bush, and on the right was a defiant Osama bin Laden, and behind them in the background were the Twin Towers, with planes exploding into them. "If only we had some money, I would surely offer to buy it from her," said Shmeiki Baba. "Lucky we don't," I said. As we turned into North Main Road, which was the beginning of Corrigan Park and the location of the famous Osho commune, or ashram, or even kashram, as it was sometimes also known, we saw people dressed in maroon robes, the uniform of the Osho follower, and we knew we had almost arrived at our destination. And while I was looking forward to meeting up with my friends Richard and Jonas, who I knew from Berlin, I also felt sad that my journey with Shmeiki Baba was about to end. I said that part of me wanted to carry on with him past Pune, and he said he felt the same way, but we agreed that doing so might limit our connections to the rest of the world. I said that I would come to Dharamsala when he reached there, and he said this would make him happy. Our first stop was the German bakery, where I thought that Richard and Jonas might be hanging out. Sure enough, they were there, both dressed in maroon robes, drinking tea. We greeted each other with such happiness, and I introduced them to Shmeiki Baba. "Ah, so you are both maroon morons," said Shmeiki Baba, without taking even a moment to get to know them. Not surprisingly, they were both a little insulted. "Here we go," I said. "So you don't resonate well with Osho?" asked Richard. "Well, I was a maroon moron myself for a little while, until I got sick of swimming around in the sewage of fake happiness and all the bullshit about enlightenment," said Shmeiki Baba. "Osho said we must give up the hope of enlightenment for it to happen," said Jonas. "Giving up the hope of enlightenment in order to get enlightenment is still looking for enlightenment," said Shmeiki Baba. "This is a paradox Osho also acknowledged," said Jonas. "If he cleared up the confusion so well, it's a shame people around here still seem to talk about it so incessantly," said Shmeiki Baba. "And what of your own path?" asked Richard. Well, it has been long and dusty, said Shmeiki Baba. It looks like it, said Jonas. We walked here without shoes or money, I said. So how did you eat? Asked Richard. People gave us food, said Shmeiki Baba. Is it not conceited of foreign tourists to travel across India taking food from poor people? Asked Jonas. Maybe, though our mission has been to regain trust in mankind and in ourselves, I said. Is that fair on the people who have had to pay for you? Asked Jonas. I don't think we made anyone else go hungry, and no one who didn't want to give us food did so, said Shmeiki Baba. There was an uncomfortable silence, until Shmeiki Baba said, Maybe I got us off to a bad start. I guess I'm angry with the hypocrisy of Osho followers because of my own. I acknowledge that I pretend to accept myself when I still do not. Richard and Jonas's expressions softened, and I took the opportunity to turn the conversation to the walls of the German bakery, which were covered with advertisements offering all sorts of spiritual services, from aura readings to healing with Egyptian hieroglyphs and sacred enemas guaranteed to make you look 10 years younger in 6 days. I suggested that a sacred enema might help Shmeiki Baba's hemorrhoid situation. Shmeiki Baba answered that he would bear it in mind. Meanwhile, Jonas bought us coffee and apple pies, which we gobbled down. Afterwards, we left the German bakery and went to Richard's apartment so I could collect my credit card which I had left with him in Arambol. I wanted to treat Shmeiki Baba with a stay in a decent hotel, and so armed with my MasterCard, I took him to the Mangrove Inn, where I booked 2 rooms. It was the first hot shower either of us had taken in a long while. Each drop of water on my head was a touch of heaven, as rays of light streamed in through the window, making the steam sparkle. I could hear Shmeiki Baba singing songs of praise next door. We both stayed in the shower until all the hot water was gone, and then slept for a few hours under the air conditioners. In the evening, Jonas and Richard came with us to Prem's restaurant on North Main Road for dinner. We ate well and drank beer and met 2 Swedish girls called Abby and Ilse. We played a game with them of not answering any question correctly, and when Jonas and Richard went home, we brought the girls back to our hotel. They had a joint to smoke, and after we shared it, I was with Abby while Ilse sat her statuesque form on Shmeiki Baba. In his face, I saw his need for the goddess. We fell asleep with the women, wrapped peacefully in each other's arms. Sunday, March the 5th, 2006. In the morning, the hotel manager banged hard on the door. He was not at all impressed we had taken 2 women back with us, and said there was no place in his hotel for goondas like us, and he asked us to leave. Shmeiki Baba said he wanted to get on his way in any case, and I decided I would move to a different guest house. As a parting gift, I gave him my compass and 2 maps that I had bought for him the day before, one of the state of Madhya Pradesh and the other of Rajasthan. I also gave Shmeiki Baba my bottle of the sweet tears of the wee baby Jesus, with instructions on how to use them, and he assured me that he would put them to good use. He handed me his bansuri, and I said, I can't take this, it's your flute. I want you to have it, he said. But without it, you'll have nothing to play, I said. It's okay, I am the instrument, he answered. Okay, Baba, I'm also learning to receive, so thank you, I said. Sebastian, said Shmeiki Baba, I want you to know that I never imagined feeling so close to someone who has dreadlocks. You are the one true hippie I have met. And while I jump up and down and make a lot of fuss about everything, you quietly get on with what you need to do. I respect you with all my heart. Shmeiki Baba, I said, you remind me that the process of awakening doesn't need to happen just once. It needs to happen many times. Yes, brother, our work is ongoing, said Shmeiki Baba. We hugged and parted ways in laughter. And that was the end of my part of the Great Walk. To say it was challenging is an understatement. It stretched me to my limits and sometimes a bit beyond. So what did it do for me? Well, I learned that it's okay for me to accept the goodness of those who wish to give to me, even if I do not have something to repay them with immediately. I also understood that there's nothing to fix about myself, and my job is to accept myself fully, whatever is there. That, for me, is the meaning of integration, and this is the way to be in harmony with the Great Mother and to experience life as a miracle. Regarding Shmeiki Baba, while I have not met him in a long time, he remains for me a soul brother, and all these years later, I remember my walk with him as a profound, transformative experience. He was willing to go with me to places that no one else was, and this allowed me to explore the farthest reaches of my soul. When I finally returned to Germany, I was a different person. I went back to my hometown where I felt that I stood out even more than I had in India. You see, I lived in a rather conservative place where people who didn't know me could be quick to judge me as a lazy hippie. I guess I partly enjoyed them doing that, as it allowed me to show them that they were wrong, and I was worth respecting. I'd like to end by saying to you, dear readers, that if any of you feel depressed and Shmeiki somehow doesn't work for you, come chop some wood on my farm in Portugal, and I promise you, you'll feel much better. I will chop some wood too, as I have a lot of wood that needs chopping, and for this reason, I've written my Shmospel quite swiftly, so please excuse me if anything doesn't make sense. Om Shmeiki Om, shmeiki.com